what happens when grief shapes your identity and life feels uncertain. Today's guest knows this lesson all too well and has turned grief into a mission to help others heal and grow. Welcome to the next chapter. I'm Karen Maurer, financial advisor at Krilogy Financial. Today, we're going to talk about exploring how preparation, both financial and emotional, can create space for healing and growth during life's most challenging seasons. I'm honored to introduce Teresa Reiniger. Teresa is a grief specialist and life transition guide who supports women through loss, transition, and identity shifts with compassion and clarity. And we all know how important that is. Teresa's work combines grief support with neuroscience-informed tools and NLP-based coaching to help women process emotions, rebuild their identity, and rediscover hope. Her story and expertise will inspire anyone navigating uncertainty. And of course, that's what we're all about, is helping women prepare and plan for the uncertain transitions in life. Teresa, you've experienced you support several grieving families, but you've experienced this yourself. Would you mind telling us about your personal story?
Sure. Yes, of course. Like all women, we do experience grief and lots of transitions through our life. But the one thing that really kind of stuck out when we talked a little ahead of time was really the thing that shifted me to do what I do now, that transition. And that was when my daughters, I have 3 daughters, and they experienced infertility and pregnancy loss. At the time, I was working at a funeral home, had been there for quite a long time. I would say at that time, probably 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I know I really wasn't prepared for what I was about to enter into with them. Lots of loss, lots of pregnancy loss. And that's really where my transition went when they experienced that. And I experienced that grief as a mother, grieving, maybe never, ever being a grandparent.
Oh, yeah.
Which I desired and wanted deeply.
Sure.
And then supporting them.
Right. When your children are hurting, you're hurting.
Really was not prepared for that. I don't think anyone's prepared for when their children are hurt.
Sure. So even deeply. Working in the funeral home industry, you still realized that you just weren't prepared. What type of skills do you feel that you needed to go through that you had to pull out of your toolkit?
Well, I would say as mothers, we want to fix everything first and foremost for our children. And a lot of times we do that. And when they're losing children or that type of thing, there's no fixing that.
Sure.
You cannot fix that. That's where I was not prepared. And I'll be honest, things that I said to them at that time, now I realize, oh my gosh, that was the worst thing to say to them.
Do you want to give us an example?
Things like I can remember vividly with my oldest daughter having a miscarriage, and I can't remember what number it was because she had 5. And I remember it was probably one of the first ones. And I said, well, at least you can get pregnant.
I see.
Looking back at that is not the best thing you can say to someone that is losing.
But you were
children.
trying to find something positive in the experience.
Because I am a more positive person. So that's what I was doing. Now with all of my education, that was my way to kind of make it positive, kind of smooth it over, kind of fix it, lift her up. And that's not the best.
So what is it that people should do when they have a family member or a colleague or a friend experience that type of tragedy?
I think we do just say what is truly there. We cannot understand what they're going through. We cannot fix what they're going through. The worst thing is to compare that loss to maybe a loss that you think is similar. I hear people say all the time, they've lost their child and someone will say, well, yeah, I know how you feel. I lost my pet.
Yeah.
I lost my whatever. We can't compare, but that's what we want to do as a society. All grief is different and we cannot fix it.
And so what should we do? Should we just be present, be there for them?
Absolutely be present, support them in any way that we can. Most of the time, what I really work with people with, if I'm educating society, which I do a lot because we need that, is just to be there. Ask them how we can support them. Many times they don't know what they need. They've never done this before, so they really don't know. But if they do, I would encourage them to make sure they say what they need. But many times it's just being present and letting them know that you're there for whatever they need. If they just need you to sit there and listen, that's probably the most powerful thing that you can say. I'm here for you, and I can just be here to listen.
So after you went through these experiences with your daughters, then you decided to get further educated in the area of grief. And now you do one-on-one training and group training. Tell me a little bit more about that and what that's looked like for you.
Sure. Well, I'll go back a little bit with them experiencing that. I had a passion to then start a podcast, believe it or not. And that podcast now it started in June of 2020. And at that time, all I talked about on that podcast was infertility and pregnancy loss, because I felt like no one was talking about it at that time.
Oh, sure. People keep that very private, unfortunately.
And so with doing that then, I found out very, very quickly what I was feeling, what my daughters were feeling with their grief, that there was not a lot of support. So from that, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of grief here and I need to support them. I felt this yearning and desire to help. And so that's when I began to do more certifications, more training, went into what you had talked about earlier in the introduction was NLP, neuro-linguistics programming, which has been, I would say, if I was to say kind of what my secret sauce is, what my expertise really is to help people go through grief, is exactly that. It's really understanding how they process things, where they hold grief, and that type of thing, so that I can really dig deep into what's going on with them as far as the brain and how they're holding things in their body.
And then that leads to one of the points that you mentioned to me on an earlier conversation that really stuck with me is what is going on with our body when we experience grief. You know, I'm focused a lot on working with my clients to help them financially and emotionally and spiritually prepare for transitions. And if they're not prepared and a transition happens that does cause some type of grief and they're stuck in what Bruce Feiler calls the messy middle, they're stuck, but maybe don't realize why they're stuck because we don't understand what's going on with our body. Could you share some of that with us?
Absolutely. So, and I've been doing actually last year, 2025, doing a lot of talks at libraries and things so that people can better understand why they're feeling and doing what they're doing. So when we have those transitions, especially with the loss of someone, the death of someone close to us, is our body physically changes.
Wow.
We are flooded with cortisol, stress, we're in trauma, all of those things. So our body shifts. We're flooded with cortisol. That's why there's the brain fog.
Sure.
That's why there's difficulty with making decisions. That's where there's difficulty with remembering what we went into a room to get. That is
that
all
happens on a daily basis.
Yeah, that too. That is all perfectly biologically normal. Many times, one of the first things people say to me is, I think I'm going crazy. Because all of this brain stuff is going on in their body physically. So they feel like they're going crazy. And I really just love to reassure them, you're not in control of this right now. This is what your body's going to do. The cortisol is flooding your body. Your nervous system is on high alert, like fight, flight, freeze.
Sure.
And I would say at that time, it's just to be aware that that's where you're at. But at some point, you want to quickly find support, because there are things that can be done, and the biggest thing is balancing out that whole nervous system so that you can think more clearly.
Sure. And is that doing something physical, like taking a walk and deep breathing exercises?
Yeah.
Is it, prayer, meditation, all those things, I imagine,
All of those
help
things.
rebalance the energy.
The thing that I encourage people to do the most, and I teach the most, and I get feedback the most on, which is very interesting to me, is something that we do every day, all day. And that's breathing. But breathing with intention.
Sure.
Like deep breaths in, holding those breaths, and then a slower exhale out. And really just doing that a couple times shifts your whole body, shifts your nervous system. So that is probably the one thing, the most important thing that I teach and work with people on, is really like, because people are triggered.
Right.
Like
right.
I have,
and they don't even realize it.
No, I have people that go into the grocery store and they're standing by the meat counter, and maybe it's hot dogs. That was their favorite their husband's favorite hot dog, and the tears flow. Well, we can breathe at that time. And that is really the first and foremost thing that I will teach people, is just take a breath.
That's such great advice. I love all of the intentional breathing exercises that now kind of seem to be, I say, on trend, but they're things we all should have been doing all along.
Oh, yeah.
And I love just driving to work and being at that stoplight, and all of a sudden I think, wait, let's just take some deep breaths, because I think that can also be a preparation skill, because we don't know what it's going to look like when we get to the office or to church or exercise or wherever you're going.
Yeah.
So another good, preparation skill.
But all of those other things that you talked about, those are all good things. And as I work with people, it's figuring out what of those good things work for them.
Right.
We're in all different. All of our situations are different. So it's really working with them to see what is the best thing for them.
Sure.
But I know breath work, breathing, intentionally breathing, is first and foremost.
Well, and that comes through in all the stages of moving through a transition. When you've got that loss, for example, and we're saying goodbye to the old routines and habits, and seeing that person and being with that person, and then we're kind of stuck in that messy middle, I call it. We pull in our tools and we help move through that messy middle and create that new beginning, which you've done in creating this. And I love that you're sharing your experience and your gift and your knowledge in various capacities. You were telling me about an acquaintance, a friend, if you will, who had an experience, but knew that your specialty sat in this space of grief and reached out to you. Can you share with us a little bit about how it was important for them to know that you were available and that you were a good resource to call in their moment of grief?
Yeah. This was just happened a few days ago. So very, very fresh on my mind that I shared with you. This friend had experienced 2 years ago the loss of a child, and then experienced another loss of a child. And so, of course, was at home. So was encouraged to call someone, why, the police were still there, I'll just say. And said, is there somebody, is there a minister, is there a friend, is there somebody to come, and support you? And she's like, I have someone. And so she called me. This was very early in the morning. And, I just started talking to her. I didn't realize it was early as it was in that loss.
in the process.
Yeah. I was like, oh my goodness. But then, working at a funeral home for as long as I did, and knowing how that process all works, I just really wanted her to be prepared for the next step. And that was, what funeral home are you using? Because I experienced that. I worked there. And so what happened then is she yelling at her husband, sort of like, what funeral home do we use? And at
Just
that time, that heightened panic, like, I don't know. And just what we described, like, I don't know. I don't remember. And that is because that cortisol, that trauma is flooding her at that time. But I feel like because I've stayed in touch with her, because we have had communication over the last 2 years, that she knew my name and my number came immediately up to her.
Wow.
And so it is important that we know if that trauma, that tragedy, that transition happens, who are those people that we're going to call?
Right.
That can help support us in knowing what is the next step, those quick decisions that need to be made. So I'm grateful that she called, and I've been in contact with her every day since, but just to know who are you going to call?
Sure. And I think not only is it whether it's your friend group, your neighbor, your church group, your, exercise friends, but also those professionals, because there are certain things that are appropriate to do right away. And I know from the financial side, there are things that you can do too quickly, and that can actually cause either a mistake or a lot of work to kind of unwind things. So I think it's also important to pull in the professionals that are around you, that have helped you kind of prepare for transitions. And then oftentimes they can refer you to other people. If you don't have a grief counselor on speed dial, your financial advisor or estate planning attorney or pastor may have access to somebody that they think would work well for you. So I do think it's important to have that kind of teed up, if you will, because these things, we might not all lose a child, but we all will experience loss. We know it's going to happen. We don't know what that experience is going to look like, but we certainly know that having people around us can help us if we need it, or they can just help us grieve. And so you're not grieving alone.
Yeah. And I think the thing that, just to speak to making decisions too quickly, because I've already talked about what happens physically in our body, that's why we've heard this said before. Probably most of us, like, don't make any major decisions, especially with finance and moving and all of those things. And that's exactly why you do not, because your brain is changed. There's things going on that those decisions cannot logically be made.
Right.
And I think it's also important, like you talked about, for me, with what I do, to make sure that I have a network of people that I know, just from the conversation that I had with her that evening, she's like, we can't live here. I've got to move. I've got to go through things. We've got to get
immediate response.
Yeah.
But might not end up being the best plan, or might not be what she really wants 6 months from now.
Right. Right. So just be able to be supportive of her, and really, for me, to help her slow her down a little bit. That's her immediate response. And we know that's not the best for her at this time.
Sure.
It will be to slow her down a little bit, and really think about those things, because there are times when we get rid of things quickly because we don't want them in our home, and then there's regret.
Right.
Like, I wish I would have kept that.
Well, and I think when someone, at least my experience with my clients, when, I have a client that her spouse was cognitively declining, and your responsibilities shift. What you end up doing in your life all of a sudden looks very different, and you're often walking into uncharted territory. I always, when I've experienced it in my own life, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, where's the book on this? What do we do with this new information and this new environment? But I had a client, very well educated. She's a teacher. Again, her husband was going through this, and she came into me one day and she said, I can't even balance my checkbook. I don't even understand what's on these bank statements. And it was so uncharacteristic of her and her skill set. Certainly she was capable of doing all of that, but she had so much extra responsibility on her plate that sometimes those things that once were routine weren't routine anymore. And I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to go through whatever your natural grieving process is important, and to give yourself permission. You see people put so much pressure on themselves of, I've got to get back to work, or and I think I had shared with you in an early conversation, that when I experienced a miscarriage and I went right back to work the next day and went through those motions because boy, I was going to do it. And I realize now, my brain wasn't even working right.
No.
Well, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or wants to maybe come to one of your grief sessions or take a listen to your podcast, why don't you share how we can reach out to you?
Sure. So my business name is Living After Grief, because that's what I believe, that we truly can live after significant loss,
What a great
significant
title.
transition. And that's the thing that I enjoy doing so much, is taking someone from those transitions, that deep loss, to really living life again, because it is important to just continue to live to the fullest. So Living After Grief, so www.livingaftergrief.com. That is where a lot of information is there. My podcast is called Female Voices, Life and Loss. I have a co-host with me. And so wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find that. And then I guess the other thing is just follow me on social media. You'll find my library talks. You'll find my retreat days that I do. All of those things are all connected there, either on my website or on my social media handles.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Teresa.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
sharing your gifts and being such a wonderful resource to the community and to friends and people that need you. And that's wonderful. We appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Karen Maurer, again, financial advisor with Krilogy Financial. Please feel free to reach out if you would like assistance in preparation for these life transitions. We're here to help. See you next time on Her Next Chapter.